Hi, everybody. It's Terri Hofstetter, and I'm here with Chris Bickle, and we're talking about various concepts with nature-based coach training, Martha Beck training, and other coaching venues that we've worked with. And I'm talking to him about some things that projects he's working on right now. How are you doing, Chris?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Great. Glad you're here. You were talking about the boat. Your new project was just a boat metaphor training thingy dingy, whatever you call it.
Yeah,
Tell me about what you're doing.
So when I first started with Martha Beck a couple years ago, we had to do a visioning exercise about what our practice might look like. And so as I was thinking about it, I had gotten this idea. It just kept coming into my head. It was the lifeboat. And since I had been a former rower and I had worked on the beach patrol and I worked in lifeboats, this boat kept on coming. And at first it was really annoying to me because I'm like, how am I going to start a practice around a lifeboat? And there's only one person that could fit in a lifeboat boat besides me. So how am I going to do like any kind of group training with just one other person? So sure. I let it go for a couple months, but then it kept coming back again and again and again. And when it came time for me to design my website, I kind of made that an integral part of it. So it's called Lifeboat Life Coaching, and I actually created a 4-tiered method. Like, you know, people can go on the website, my website, and they can do an archetype quiz to see where they are in this ocean lifeboat metaphor. Okay. And I correlated it to Martha Beck's 4 stages. So I'm drawing a blank on all 4 of them right now, but that's okay.
Okay. You're talking her 4 squares.
The 4 squares, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of like throwing yourself, like the cataclysmic event that throws yourself out and you're starting over, and then you're imagining how you're going to do things.
That's it.
And then taking action and then getting to where you want to be.
That's exactly it.
I think I summed it up pretty well.
You did a great job. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was promptu and spontaneous. Yeah, so how does that work with, you work directly with people on that?
So what had happened is when I first started it, I had a few people that I talked to online and then through email who took the archetype quiz. And that provided like good coaching. But then I realized like I wanted to take it a step further and get people in the boat. The problem was I don't live near the ocean anymore. I'm about 2 hours away, and I don't have a boat anymore. So last summer I started looking around. I was looking at purchasing a boat, and I talked to an old friend of mine who has he owns a dock, and he started last summer into this summer, he started a surf boat club. So he bought all these lifeboats that people can rent and take people out on. And I'm like, this is perfect. So when I realized I could get in a boat and actually take people out, I'm like, I got to let people see what this looks like a little bit more. So I created the guided lifeboat visualization, kind of like a Martha Beck journey, except you're in a lifeboat. So created that so people could see what this process looks like. Because, when you hear about it, you're like, wow, a guided lifeboat visualization, what is that?
Yeah.
And I think it's been helpful to see the process of what it might look like if you do the coaching in a boat, and not to mention there's metaphors with the boat as well. So
right, and you can build from that because you can do groups with that later on, or a one-to-one where they're in the boat next to you or something like that.
Yes,
there's a lot of openings for that to build.
And even if people just go through the visualization, the ending of it, I end with a really great metaphor to then kind of like work with on future coaching. It's just such a great metaphor to dig into as you move forward. So that's the part I like most about it.
Right. Well, I do want to tell you, I did your visual when you had the little forum set up, and it's suddenly, I thought, okay, I'm going to play, it's great. And he wants to have people try this out. I'm always open to trying new things that coaches do. And suddenly, yes, there's somebody out in the water. What are you going to do? And it woke me up to suddenly, who are my clients? Who do I help? how do I help them? And the way, and of course, we've both worked so much with metaphors, the way any good metaphor works is you're putting yourself out of that situation
Yes.
and into the metaphor, and then you allow it to build on that.
That's right.
So I loved it, and it was really helpful. I suddenly thought, okay, well, and I could do this like 3 months from now, I can do it and I'll get a totally different answer.
You're right. And you know, right before I was going to actually create the videos for it, I put them online. I was playing around with it, and I was thinking about how I wanted to, if I'm a person going through that, how I want to step through it. And so I kind of did it to myself. And one of the things I wound up with, one of the things that I saved during the metaphor, you know, you throw the life preserver out, you save whatever it is. And I saved, the representation was like free coaching. Like, my thing was, I needed to be able to let people see this for free so that they could see it and see the value in it.
Yeah.
And honestly, up to that point, I was like always a little nervous about giving a ton of stuff away. And now I just like give a ton of stuff away because it's good for people to see what's out there, you know, and how they benefit from it. And then they still wind up with that metaphor that you can still work through. So I found that's what I saved. But if I did it now, I'd probably save something different, to your point.
Yeah.
You know, when you do it, it's something different.
Well, and that actually builds on that, because you never give something away for free. You're offering it for free. And Martha Beck uses give them a cookie. You're not going to give them the recipe. You're going to give them a cookie, and they try the cookie. And they either like it or they don't. And sometimes they like the cookie and they're fine with it. And sometimes they tell their friends, and sometimes they want to get your recipe.
That's right. That's great. That's another great analogy that you could dig into.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like that. And it's always something we the more we put out to the world, and I find that out, is the more we put out to the world, there's always something that comes back.
That's right. I agree with that.
And if I can help people on a small level, I do. And that's another reason why I like doing videos like this, is because I can talk to people about stuff and share, and then do that as something to offer to people as well.
And you know, to go back again to your initial question on this, was one of the things that I was thinking about when I first came up with the idea was like that I was a history teacher. I wrote curriculum for world history, and one of the things that comes up again and again in early societies is everybody, in order to trade and in order to develop civilizations, everybody like rowed, sailed, had oars. And there's something magical, like when you're out on the water with an oar, it's like you're connecting back to the beginning of civilization. There's a creation there that I think when you tap into it, it's really good for visioning. And that's one of the reasons why I was kind of pushing this, because I'm like, just so fascinating to me. You know, it takes you back to the beginning of society. So
anyway. Yeah, and that's something to connecting with the water, the air, the sun. Yeah. And the earth, because you're in a wooden boat or you're going to another point of land. And well, there's also a lot of great teachers use boats.
Yes.
There was Jesus as a fisherman. Buddha was doing things with boats. There was the Native Americans had boats. The Polynesians had, well, every culture had boats.
Everybody, yeah.
There's something in it in everything. So,
and that's something I think everybody can relate to as a base to kind of move out from. So that's why I love that. It's such a big metaphor. And even when I was doing the video, I realized as I was talking through the video, I kept saying like that, okay, you're going off the dock, that's your threshold. And you're going out on this journey, and then you're coming back to the dock, you're returning home. You know, there was this,
cool.
Like, wow, this is great. So,
and everybody, my guess is everybody has their own little metaphor on that. Have you gotten to hear from other people on what their thoughts are?
Yeah, I had 3 people that formally beta tested it, and then I had 2 people that went through it like a coaching, and I've just such amazing, at least in my mind, such amazing insights. And the last person I was working with, one of the things that, the thing she saved, one of the things it gave her was a tree. And the tree became the metaphor for a coaching discussion. And what was amazing is her initial question was, if you don't mind me telling you this, her initial question was how can I be a good adult? How can I be a good mom to my now adult kids? Right? Like empty nest, 3 kids in school. And one of the things we played with in the metaphor is this concept of, trees, maple leaves, they fly away from the mother, right? So they have to get far away from the tree they need that space to survive. By the same token, underneath the ground, they're still connected by the roots. And she came to all this as we were going through the coaching. And it's that metaphor, you could play with it. There's something deep about that, about on the surface, your kids are away from you, but you're still connected. And I think it was,
roots.
Yeah, I think she was very happy to kind of like get to that point of understanding, like, oh, that's why it gave me a tree.
Oh yeah. Well, and with the metaphors, we always come up with those, and sometimes they pop into our head. Sometimes they pop into the coach's head. Sometimes they pop into the client's head. But I've liked working with metaphors for years. Before I even knew about coaching, I would see something and I'd go, wow, that's a good example to explain that. And they pop up sometimes in our heads when we work with that.
Yes.
And it's a really good coaching tool and a really good teaching tool.
And people are not threatened by it because they're working through the metaphor. So they're not necessarily directly connecting to their own emotion right away. It's like, I can work through this metaphor. And then they realize, like, oh, the metaphor is what I'm going through, and then it just makes it so much easier, especially when you're working with somebody that you haven't met before, that's sharing things intimately. So I find that to be, it's non-threatening, the metaphor. So yeah.
I'm going to mention an example that hits my mind of something that you had done recently. And I think you posted a video of teaching fire building to kids.
Yes.
Students you worked with. And not to give away spoil the effect, but on the video, you're teaching the kids and you're demonstrating. And my hunch is later on, you taught each of the kids and they got a chance to try it out too. And my thought is that in some cases, you may have worked with the kids and talked to them about it later, or you may have just showed it. But even if you don't directly work with a metaphor, they're going to get it themselves.
Yes.
Is that your impression too?
Yes. And I can tell you, even after demonstrating that, and then a handfuls of kids try it, but it's the bow drill is really hard to.
Yeah. So I didn't get it. I didn't get it out when we did training either.
But I bring the flint and steel also to show them how to do the spark, and I find that's a lot easier for them to get the spark. And inevitably, I think they walk away with this concept of like how incredibly hard it is to create a fire, right? And then we relate that to school and studying, and how incredibly hard it is. It is hard to go into school every day and study and open up your brain, and they realize that. But then once you get sparked and it lights up, it's easier. You don't have to do anything at that point. That fire's on. So there's a lot of
practice. Once they practice doing that.
And that particular one, I always have them read how Coyote stole fire beforehand, because the end of the story.
I forgot about that story. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good story. And at the end of the story, it gets into at least Coyote is that he teaches them how to make the fire from the sticks, and there becomes the learning in there. But a lot of those Native American stories always have all the animals together help steal the fire and get the fire. And there's a element of like community in there. Like it takes all of us to get a fire. It takes you and the teacher and the custodian and the principal. It takes all of us to make this fire. And we try to connect that back into the story, because all those stories, it doesn't matter which one, there's one animal goes in, fails. Another animal tries to steal the fire, fails. Another one goes in, fails. And then finally somebody else can do it. But then in order to get the fire back, they have to pass it along, you know? So there's so many great examples of community in there. So I think the kids get that. And depending upon the grade level, like I do it with 3rd grade, I've also done it with 4th and then 5th grade. And they're always like, every year, they're just like, my gosh, I can't believe it's so hard to make a fire.
and every year it's a little, they still remember how hard it is. But my hunch is that that's something that's going to hit their mind. And even if they're with you just that one time and they move away and do something else, they're going to remember that 20 years from now. Yeah.
Yeah. And they really, there's kids that loiter at the end of it and they want to keep practicing. They want to learn more. And that part's really cool. And last year I did a program for teachers. I only had 4 people that signed up for it. But it was kind of a play on, if you heard of the show Naked and Afraid, this one was, would you survive a colonial winter not naked and not afraid? And in there we did bow drill fire making, we did cordage, and we did candle making. And like, people just can't believe how incredibly hard it was, even in colonial times, to get fire in the winter, you know, to make candles that saw you all the way through. So it was a really fun course. This year maybe we'll get more people.
Well, and we can appreciate how hard it is, but for them, theoretically, it was hard, but they may not have realized how hard it is because they don't know another way to get fire. They didn't have butane lighters, so that was their way to do it, and they learned really early in their life. So with practice, but just like watching somebody ride a bicycle, I don't remember how hard it was to learn how to ride a bike.
No, you're right. Yeah.
I can't think back that far.
Yeah, so, that was just their life. You're right.
Yeah, but gives that impression. And when I was a kid, we had a place near us called the Log Cabin Village, and they actually took log cabins from different parts of Texas and rebuilt them in the 1950s for this.
Oh, wow.
They took the logs, took them apart, and moved. Some of the cabins they were able to move bit by bit, but there were a few of them that they took them apart. And we had people demonstrating candle making and different things that they did. And there's a lady in a pioneer dress and explaining it. But we didn't really have the point I'm getting at is we didn't have the whole full effect of it.
Yes.
Because they were just showing us this is how they lived. They weren't actually showing us how to do it.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to it, the hands-on experience.
Yeah. And also one of the things that I think in public education that kids miss is like we study colonial winter, right? Like we really spend a lot of time on that, but kids don't get exposed to, let's say, the fire making. And they don't realize how much of their time was dedicated to making fire, making candles so they had light during the winter. And we kind of like just pass over that. But that was a large chunk of the time, that preparation for winter time, getting the food ready, the light. And so they're not really getting the full effect of what it was like to live during colonial times, and that's why I started doing this, just a way to show them. Yeah.
Yeah. With working with kids and adults, I know their learning processes are so different. Is it, how can I word that? Is it so, can you grab it and know kind of ahead of time how the adults are going to take it versus how the kids? Or are they more well received by the kids? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the kids, by and large, when they show up to these we're doing, like, for example, the fire making, you can see in their eyes they're like engaged, they're curious, and they want to try it and they want to see how it's done. And I think sometimes the adults are kind of like, at first, their first impression is like, this is hard, I'm not dressed for this right, might take too long. You can see that their rut that they're in is a little bit differently. They're they're not looking at it completely curious and ready to go. They're just kind of like, this is cool, but I'm not really going to try it. But once they try it, like last year, the one of the people in the one course I had, she was a nurse, and once she started going, she started getting smoke. She went from like I couldn't get her off the ground. She was just like going, and then she started getting a fire, and I had to tell two of the other people next to her, I'm like, we have to grab her hair, because her hair was like getting down near the because nobody thought we were going to get even close to a fire. And so they were closer to her. I'm like, somebody's got to pull back her hair, because we just weren't ready
to stop.
But she was going crazy. She saw smoke and was like, I'm going for it. And
so she was ignited, so to speak.
She was ignited. She was the last person I would think was going to get this thing going, and she got it going. Wow. Yeah. So, but it takes adults longer. The kids show up really curious, and the adults are a little bit more skeptical at first. But I think that's just because they're ruts. You know, they got deeper ruts to get out of. Kids are yep. more flexible and adaptive. But that's the biggest difference. That's a great question.
I like that. I started to say that the adults were skeptical. So there's this curiosity versus skepticism.
Right.
As we always say in nature coaching, the curiosity versus confusion. Well, we got curiosity versus skepticism.
That's right.
That sounds pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty realistic about how the different learning styles go. And I've noticed too, and I've learned this from Michael, our mentor at Sagefire. He said he took adults out, and the kids, immediately you get them out in the woods and they're going to get excited. The adults, you have to do one little thing to inspire them, like throw rocks and stones into the pond or something, or walk through the leaves. But he said there's that moment where the adults just shift and get into it.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would guess that with kids, it takes 2 to 3 minutes, and with adults, it might take 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, you know, I had a bigger group where we did the flint and steel, and I showed them how to make a tinder bundle, and then we practiced flint and steel, because I wanted this group, it was a much bigger group of teachers, I wanted them to have success with it. And, you know, when we first started, there was a couple people that were doing it, and then they just stopped. I could see them just stop. And then there was a few others that they were going, and as soon as they saw the spark, and then they're like, what do we do? What do we do? I'm like, okay, so now you want to put it on the ground, you want to blow on it. And then as soon as a couple people started getting it, the other groups were like, we could do that too. And they needed to see an example. And even with flint and steel, there was a couple people who did 20 minutes of clicking, and they got nothing. So, you know, I was hoping that this would be a much quicker thing for them to have success with. And it was better. But you're right. Like, you could see all of a sudden everybody shifted to, wait, let's make a fire now. You know, whereas before they're like, this is stupid. We're not going to do this. But then they turned quickly. So you're right. Your assessment's correct. They just need that one little inspirational thing.
They need that nudge.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets us a little segue to talking about inner tracking. And I want to touch on that just briefly, because we worked on a lot of that in Sagefire. And what I see is, or the old summary of inner tracking is, where do you see this? How does this transfer to your everyday life, or where you see this somewhere else? And my hunch is it's not just this particular project we're working on. That could go with any metaphor, and sometimes the metaphor jumps first before we have the question. And I found that a lot of times is I haven't even asked the question yet, and I see a metaphor and I say, what does that have to do with anything?
Yes, you're right. And it's a lot more fun you're right, sometimes they can pop up at any point. Like in this, the guided lifeboat visualization, there's a part where you're talking about what are you reaching for and pulling in. And so the person I was working with recently said that she was pulling in like balance into her life. That's what she wanted to pull in. And then she had a work scenario where she had an opportunity to work with somebody who is not good for her energy. And she said the next day, they asked her and she's like, no, I don't want to do that. And she said that going through the visualization made her realize that, no, I'm pulling in good energy and balance right now. But she got the balance from the boat. And that's what she took from it. And so I went with that metaphor a little bit. And but again, it was one of those things that popped up right in the moment. And I didn't initially think of that when I was looking at it, but that's the way she took it was. So it's noticing them and then running into them and playing with it, I think is the funnest part of coaching. And I can hear you say that too, because metaphor is different and they just pop up sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll see something will pop up and there's a metaphor and I think, okay, this has got to be a metaphor. Sometimes they jump out like a bird sits in the window and you say, okay, there's a bird in the window and it's obvious that something came up. But when they pop up, then you say, okay, what's this a metaphor for?
That's right.
And one of them, I'll give you an example. A few days ago, I was at the garden store and they had birdhouses for sale. And something just possessed me. I want to get this birdhouse. And I didn't even pay any attention. I just got it home. And it sat there outside in the garden on the picnic table for a week or two. And I just never got around to putting it up. And it just seems so hard. Okay, first I have to think, then I started thinking, I got to get the tools, Okay, finally I said, I'm going to put it up today. Right. And okay, first I got to get the ladder. I got to see, okay, am I going to use a screw? Am I going to use a nail? Am I going to hammer it in and all this stuff? And so it's a little beautiful birdhouse, and it's it's got a small little hole there for chickadees. Oh. And it says on there what kind of birds it's going to attract, what direction. You have to have it facing the southeast and all this. And I'm all over this with the nature. Right. And, oh, cool, southeast, I got that. And there has to be 2.5 meters high and all this. Great. So by the time I decided to do it, and I'm asking my husband, tools-wise, and I got the ladder, and I got it up in just 5-10 minutes. And right. I've been putting this, including the time it took me to put the ladder up and get the ladder in place. And I thought, okay, here's the deal. This is great. I put it off for so long. Didn't think anything of it. But it caught me when I was asking my husband. I said, I'm going to put this up. And he said, okay, this is, it was the first week in September. And he says, well, the birds aren't nesting now. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Why didn't I think of that? And he goes, it'll be ready for next spring. But you can put it up now. So when the birds come back in the spring, they'll be ready for it. And I thought, oh, wait a second. That's a metaphor. It just slammed me. And I thought earlier that day, I was thinking about this program that I had done in a conference call program that didn't fly. So I didn't get enough sign-outs. I jumped out, put it out real quickly, and I didn't give enough lead time and all this. And I thought, oh, it'll be ready next spring when the birds come. So I need to design a program now for a few months in advance and start thinking about what I'm going to do. So, and put the news out ahead of time so it'll be ready when the clients come. That's
right. That's great. Look at that metaphor.
I'm like, oh man, it's a great metaphor. Here we go.
That's right.
On top of the fact I'm climbing the ladder and I'm getting, there's branches in the way. How am I going to get the ladder balanced?
Oh, yes.
And how do I get around these branches? And there's obstacles. And it was just full of metaphors all over the place.
And it makes you feel good because you can solve it in a way that you're not necessarily attached to it. Like thinking of that metaphor of making a birdhouse so darn attractive that the birds are going to want to fight to get in there. That's cool. Sounds like fun.
Isn't it great?
So, and maybe that's also the plus side of doing a metaphor is that usually if somebody's giving you a metaphor where you're working with, it's something that they have a relationship to. It might be something that they really find in their life that they see a lot. It might be something out in nature. So they generally have a relationship with it that is positive. So it's a good building off point. So you're right. Yeah, that's great.
Isn't that great? Well, Chris, is there anything else you wanted to talk about today before we start winding down?
I think that's it. I mean, I think that the biggest part was kind of talking about that visualization, the guided lifeboat thing, and I think that was a lot of fun. At least being able to describe that in a way that hopefully makes sense to people, that they can check it out.
Yeah.
It has a lot of value in that if you're not near the water and you're not even familiar with it, it throws you completely out of your comfort zone, and usually that's where you get some of the coolest learning. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of just talk through it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, our best learning is being able to get out of that comfort zone and see how we get that. And that goes perfect tie into all the nature programming that we do and different activities, is get out there and try something and experiment to get where you're going.
Yeah. And also one thing I'd like to probably at least end with is, when I first did my website, I didn't know what to call any of my packaging, my offering. And so I kept going back into me, and I said, what's something how will I do this that can define me, like the fun that I want to have with this? So one of the things I named, one of my things was like the Forrest Gump, where I'll sit next to you on a bench. Another one was called the Castaway, where I send the client out to do things in nature by themselves. Like
talk to Wilson.
Yeah, talk to Wilson. And I try to think of things that I like to do, but also that would be give people an idea of doing something different in a kind of a fun way. And the Forrest Gump thing I think I like the most because there's something nice about sitting next to somebody on a bench, not across from them, but sitting next to them and kind of seeing what they see and coaching them in a way. So there's a cool metaphor with that too,
I've actually used that comparison too with the Forrest Gump thing of talking, just sitting next to somebody talking about life.
If I could bring this up too, I recently recommended a book. It was called The Come of Age that Michael Trotter from Sage Fire had mentioned to us. And so I was reading it, and it's taking me a long time to get through the first couple chapters, but it's been worth it. So one of the pieces of advice he gives to parents of young kids that I have is when you're talking to a teenager, he said the last thing you want to do is have them across from you, because teenagers feel very threatened by that. He said you want to have them sitting next to you so you can see what they see. He used the same exact verbiage. And I'm like, that's what I was thinking about when I was talking about Forrest Gump. And then I was talking to another person about it who has teenage kids. And she said, that's why my kids talk the most to me when we're in the car, because I'm not looking at them. I'm like, there must be something to that.
There's that being on the road and talking together.
Yeah. But see, I like that strategy because I can relate to that. Oh, I can get along better with my kids if I sit right next to them and talk. Okay, I can use that strategy. To me, it was a simple way to apply what he was talking about in the book. But anyway, so I again, that's another example of using, like I see there, Forrest Gump, which made me think about a different way to coach, a different way to relate to my kids. Anyway, so yeah, and that's
I like that too, because it's sitting next to, you're at the same level.
Yes.
If you cross, then somebody could be in a dominant situation.
That's right. And they feel like that. I think their whole life in school, they got teacher, kid. If they go to the principal office, principal, kid, guidance counselors across from you. So I think there's something that's non-threatening. And also, for some reason, I know when I talk to my two and I say, look me in the eyes, I start to see the eyes roll. And a turn off. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to try this other thing. So, and I just read it 2 nights ago, so I haven't implemented the strategy to say it works yet, but I'm going to try it. So,
well, that's a good thing to close off with. I like that.
Yeah.
Sit together on a park bench. And see how many times that will pop up somewhere.
Thank you, Terri, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Chris. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye.